Hello and a very warm welcome to the Internet of Things Made Simple. I'm Larry Humor. This is both our 35th mini episode and the second in our four-part series aimed at helping organizations of all shapes and sizes choose and implement the best IoT solution to help them now and in the future. If you're new to the podcast, first, welcome aboard, and we encourage you to check out our webpage, theinternetofThingsMadeSimple.com, which has an extensive amount of material that we've done over the past little while. Finally, we ask that you both subscribe to this podcast using your favorite podcast service, and if that podcast service allows you to leave a comment or a review about our show, kindly do so. In the first part of our series, mini episode 34, if you're playing along at home, we covered how it was important that an organization first do an honest assessment as to where things stand. What do they have in place now? What is the overall technology level, both of acceptance in your company to technology and knowledge of it? And what were they truly hoping to gain from the right IoT solution? In this episode, we're going to talk about a number of important decisions that have to be made in the selection process for your solution. We're going to cover 10 separate points that you might want to consider. Some of them are ones that cross over to just about any business or organization, while others might be more specific to your region or to your industry. So before we get started on the list, I wanted to point out that by no means is this list the only things you need to consider. There are definitely going to be other considerations for your particular business or organization. If you have any questions about one that I might have missed or something about your particular organization, our contact details are at the end of the show. Feel free to reach out to us. So on to the list. The first thing to consider, and again, this list is in no particular order, is cloud or not cloud. In this case, I'm referring to whether you want to use an online hosted service in the cloud or if you want to host the data and the application yourself. The growth of the cloud in the business world has been staggering. It seems that nobody wants to host their own data anymore, and to a large extent, I can definitely see why. Let others do what they do best, and you focus on what you do. For the vast majority of solutions, the choice to have a cloud-based offering is going to be the right one. The level of security, availability, and reliability in these platforms is so high that it's unlikely that a cloud-based solution will not meet your needs. However, in one of our examples, there may be an exception. As you may recall, we made up 3 fictional organizations in the first part of this series. Both the construction and restaurant organizations will not have any issues here, but that might not be the case for that small municipality. Many geographical areas have restrictions on certain type of information being hosted or accessible in the cloud. And this includes law enforcement and health-related industries like hospitals. If you need to access that kind of information, you're going to want to do your research here. But otherwise, the cloud is likely the way to go. The second point we're going to cover today is somewhat related to the first, and it's how you're going to access the information. Many fixed locations, so take our restaurant chain, will have fixed landline-based services available, and they'll likely want to use those as the primary access method to any cloud-based service. This makes sense as the cost is fixed, pardon the pun, and it's ideal for huge amounts of data. However, in many cases, devices like smartphones and tablets are used in locations away from the office, so a cellular-based connection might be ideal. Either way, you need to ensure that you have a reliable method of accessing that cloud-based service for the solution you choose. The last point before we move on to point number 3 is about backup. The more vital a solution is to your business, the greater the need to have a backup method of accessing the internet. We've spoken about how many cellular gateways are used to back up fixed landline connections to the internet, and this may need to be part of your plan. The third and fourth points are going to have a varying level of concern depending on what kind of business you have, but they should be important for any deployment. The third one is to look at any legal or industry requirements that a solution has to satisfy to be used. On the legal front, it may be that you need to get different permissions to access or share data, or maybe you need to have certain things in place for your solution to be used in a vehicle. An example of this is you may need to have certain hands-free options if the solution is expected to be used while the vehicle is moving. Do your research here, as this definitely varies based on jurisdiction. The industry checks that need to be done also vary a lot depending on what industry that you are in. We're going to talk about security and privacy next in point number 4, and there are many industries that have restrictions on data being accessed. Your industry may also have different requirements for hardware that has to be used. Here are two quick examples. If your workers are expected to use a device within a certain proximity of explosives or gas lines, there are definitely strict requirements as to the device. It's often referred to as Class 1 Div 2 or Division 2. The solution that may need to be used will have no connectivity in the device, and it only sends data once it's put back into a dock in the car. No cellular while you're on site. Another example may be with the ability for a device to be resistant to mildew or bacteria, like in the case of a device used in certain medical and laboratory facilities. These things are usually easy to find out about your industry, so check into it before you make any decisions. Point number 4 lumps together two important aspects that are equally important in their own right: privacy and security. Let's start with privacy first. Does your solution meet all privacy concerns, both from a customer expectation standpoint and from a legal or regulatory one? It can be anything from screens that can't be seen from different angles, to blurring customer names, to ones that block attempts to share sensitive information. Security is equally important. I think you'd agree. Does your solution offer security that meets the standards at all steps of the solution? This would apply to local security on device in the event that it was stolen. It would involve security of data during its transmission cycles, and on the storage side, which is likely in the cloud. While everyone needs to take security seriously, it's especially true for different industries. So again, do your homework here. A little bit of extra money spent on security planning and implementation is a lot cheaper than an unwanted security breach. Points number 5 and 6 are also related, so we put them together. 5 has to do with scalability. Your organization might be small now, and perhaps you always want it to be, but maybe it will grow much bigger than you ever dreamed. Does your chosen IoT solution meet your needs now, and will it for the next 3, 5, or even 10 years? Sure, as you add drivers to your fleet, you can always add more hardware and vehicles, but does the cloud solution expand the same way? Some solutions have a maximum number of users, and if you exceed that, you have to scrap some or even all of your investment to expand. You're going to want to know this. You'd also want to know about scalability of your solution provider, especially if you're one of their larger customers. Can they meet your needs? Point 6 is about maintaining your solution. We're going to cover this in much more detail in the 4th part to our series in a couple weeks, but I wanted to touch on it here. What's involved in maintaining devices and systems once you've installed them? Does the solution push out updates, or do you have to attach a cable to it each time? How often does your solution provider do updates? And does the time that systems are down hurt your organization? Finally, how is the data stored by the vendor? Are you expected to do anything with old data after a certain amount of time? This may not be a concern, but you definitely should still ask about ongoing maintenance. Again, we're going to cover this much more in part number 4, so definitely tune in for that episode. Number 7 has to do with training, and this has a varying level of importance depending on a number of factors. If you have a fair amount of staff turnover, such as in the case of a seasonal or temporary employees, you want to make sure that the system of choice is one that minimizes the learning curve to reduce your training costs and downtime. You also want to know what resources or tools are required for training, especially if you have a lot of remote employees. The cost of driving or flying people in can be huge. Brownie points go to solutions where people can be trained online whenever possible. Finally, if your customers are going to access a portal to see their data, how much work is involved in educating your customers to use and to enjoy the new system? Number 8 has to do with the type of system it is. Is it proprietary or open? You may not understand what that is, but the best 2 examples I can give you are 2 of the biggest technology companies in the world, Apple and Microsoft. Apple is definitely the proprietary or closed system. They make the hardware, they write the software, and they control all the connectivity and security in between. Microsoft, on the other hand, produces software and platforms that allow you to add in different components as you see fit. To be clear, there's no right or wrong answer here. It really depends on you and your organization. Is your company kind of a set it and forget it kind of company? Do you just like stuff to work and have relatively straightforward requirements? In that case, a closed system might be ideal for you. Many solutions work pretty close to right out of the box and often have solutions that you need now and allow you to focus on what you do for a living. This is the power of Apple's solutions. You can use them and minimize the learning curve. However, if you have unique requirements, or you want to have flexibility on hardware choices, or simply don't like to put all your eggs in one basket, an open solution is better for you. The downside here is that you often have to do some of your own programming and staging, and it might require more effort and ongoing maintenance. Which should you choose? Well, this goes back to the honest assessment part from part 1. Do you want things just to work, or are you kind of a tinkering and make things better kind of person or company? We're going to finish off with the last 2 points, 9 and 10, which focus more on things you should look at once you've made a decision as to the solution you want. Number 9 is about how to do a trial right. For many people over the years, they would say to me as a salesperson, "Can I have a demo to play with?" And they barely open the box. The other thing that struck me as odd for some very large customers who have revenues in the billions is they were hell-bent on not spending a dime for a demo. If you did that, I never took you all that serious, to be honest. If you are serious about a potential IoT project, you need to do your trial right. First, remember that a trial is an investment. It's going to require time, money, and effort on your part. If a project can save your company thousands or even millions of dollars, you need to be all in to do your testing right. This means setting up trial systems, engaging your team for input, and most of all, have a strong objective to the trial. What are you looking to accomplish? You need to have a goal. It might be something like, for this trial to be deemed a success and for us to move forward on this project, it needs to reduce the amount of time to put in an order by 25%. Otherwise, it's not worth the investment. I always knew if a customer had some kind of a goal from a trial, they were very serious about IoT. So you should be too. If not, they're likely wasting their time. The final point, number 10, has to do with short-term versus long-term cost. Way back in mini episode 19, which is June 6th of 2019, we covered how a $1,000 cellular gateway is often cheaper in the long run than a $300 one because it lasts longer, had less downtime, and it often requires you to service it less often. You need to factor this mindset into your decisions. Is there a more expensive hardware choice that may in fact reduce your overall cost over the life of the deployment? Is it more reliable, allowing your staff to focus more on customers and not hitting the reset button? The same goes for upgrades and break fix. Now, I often shun extended warranties from big box stores, as I've heard how outrageously profitable they are for the retailer. Many take this mindset when it comes to service contracts. And it definitely is the case sometimes, but you need to factor in what is the cost of downtime of your system versus the cost of the service contract. What is the cost per hour of downtime at a site? In many cases, a few minutes of downtime once a year would justify the cost of a service contract. So definitely do your research here and don't blow it off. To round out this episode, we're going to touch on some of the items for our 3 fictional organizations. The first company, as you might recall, is a mid-sized construction company, and they have some unique challenges. They often work in some very tough environments, so any device that's used needs to meet the demands for those environments. One other funny point may have to do with the workers. I remember a construction company told me that BlackBerries weren't ideal for them back in the day because most of the workers, and this was their quote, had sausage-sized fingers and hit 3 keys at once on the keyboard. Make sure you choose hardware that meets the needs of your workers. The remote nature of many construction projects also factors into things like maintenance and servicing of your devices. If your devices are often far away from your IT staff, you need to focus more on devices that can be reliable and easy to upgrade over the air. Finally, there might not be Wi-Fi or a landline connection available at most construction sites, so they need to ensure that whatever solutions they choose are capable of working over cellular. With the high speed and low latency and availability of today's cellular networks, this likely won't be an issue. Our second example, as you might recall, is a small chain of restaurants. As mentioned in the first part, employee turnover is often an issue for restaurants, so any IoT solution needs to be both easy to use to reduce training costs and easy to maintain. The second concern for this organization is security. Many restaurants are sending financial information, like processing credit card transactions. While most point-of-sale terminals on their own will meet or exceed the requirements for this processing, I would recommend possibly moving some of the traffic off of the public internet. You can do this by setting up some dedicated services from your cellular provider. The final point here has to do with the hardware chosen. It may have to be more rugged than you think. Do you really think the average 18-year-old delivery driver is going to be gentle with a point-of-sale terminal or a device? Might devices in the restaurant be exposed to water, flour, oils, heat, or other elements that might make it tough? Are sensors expected to work in cold freezers or near hot ovens? While restaurants might not need a durability in the same way as, say, a fire truck, you might want to ensure that devices are up to the task. Our third example, on the other hand, does involve trucks like a fire truck, and that's a small municipality. One unique concern, as I kind of hinted at earlier, might be the ability to even use a cloud-based service. Some regions won't have any issues using cloud-based services, but others may have to host things locally, especially if they're accessing federal systems, because they might not feel the same way. You want to do some research here. The final point about municipalities is the issue of upfront versus long-term cost. A great example of this is the popularity of buses with fiberglass exteriors. At first glance, it seems foolish for a city to spend more on a bus that has fiberglass, as it costs a fair amount more than the traditional bus. However, many are still moving this way because they're realizing that the cost of ongoing maintenance and the fuel costs go down significantly. When you factor in the savings over the length of time the bus is going to be used, the upfront investment makes a lot of sense. A similar focus or way of thinking has to be done for IoT. Many cities own assets that are going to be used for the long term. A bit of research as to the 5, 10, or 20-year cost might show that it makes more sense to spend a bit more money up front. Thanks again for listening. We hope you enjoyed this episode. In the next episode, which is part 3 to this series, we offer up some tips on how to ensure a smooth installation and integration of your chosen IoT solution. Remember, we love to hear from you, good, bad, or ugly. Please start with our Facebook page, The Internet of Things Made Simple, which also has some links to some previous material I've done. If I'm personally connected to you on LinkedIn, drop me a note that way through that service. Or if we're personally connected, drop me an old-fashioned email or text. I don't get as many of those as I used to. Thanks again for listening. I'm Larry Boy Humor. Take care.